Hello. How are you all doing? Yeah. Good? Good? Yeah? You guys The weather in Austin has not been as good as I had hoped, unfortunately, coming from New York City. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. All right, awesome. The blaring house music hasn't drowned us out just yet. Thank you so much for coming to this panel on interaction drama and storytelling. We have 3 esteemed panelists and a 4th one who's running down here. I guess we can count him as a secret surprise guest. He'll be the person on the end. But yeah, I guess to get started, I'd love to get introductions from you guys, and you can talk about who you are and what you do, and then we can get started from there.
Hey there, I'm Dan Connors. I'm a co-founder at Telltale Games, who most recently created the Walking Dead game. Also work as executive producer on that project.
Gary?
Hi, I hope you guys can hear us better than we can hear ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm Gary Whitta. I was the story consultant on season 1 of the Walking Dead game, and I also wrote one of the 5 episodes.
I'm Sean Mackiewicz. I'm the editorial director of Skybound Entertainment, which means I edit The Walking Dead.
Awesome. Well, I guess my first question is, for you guys, what makes a good story? Dan, maybe you want to start.
What makes a good story?
Yeah, for you, what stirs your soul?
Well, I always like stories with a lot of, a lot of dramatic tension and characters that grow through the series, and characters that that you can really believe in and follow. I always like to see characters put in difficult situations and really see what happens with the character. So, for me, it's always about character. So, Tony Soprano or Rob Snow, those types of things.
Sure. What about Tony Soprano for you is like an archetypally good character?
Oh, well, Tony Soprano, just because all the pressure he's under to do what he needs to do and just trying to do right but always doing wrong kind of things, and, just where he is. So, the Sopranos in Telltale being an episodic series, we always looked at the Sopranos as kind of the best version of storytelling, episodic storytelling at the time.
Right. Gary, what for you makes a good story?
Full nudity.
That's a requirement.
I always like to start there, hook them right away. No, it's interesting. I spend a lot of my day job technically is kind of working in more traditional, linear, old-fashioned storytelling medium like film and television, and working with the Telltale guys on the interactive side has been a real eye-opener for me, and I've learned a lot about storytelling in the process. I think that generally the rules that I've always applied to what makes a good story still apply in video games. You want compelling characters, you want people that we care about, and interesting stakes, just things that pull us in and make us care. That's the key, is how do we make people care? And what's interesting is, I spend a lot of time talking about writing in my business, and we hear all about why do we care about the lead character? What makes us care about what the lead character wants? And it's interesting, in the video game world, you think it might be easier because you are the lead character. You should care about yourself and your own goals, but it doesn't fully substitute for a great character and a great mission, and having you be the character, the protagonist, gets you halfway there, but you still have to care about what's happening within the world of the story. And so we're still learning, I think, what makes a great story in video games as opposed to what makes a great story in other mediums. But
do you feel like there are universal things that people care about, such as full nudity, apparently?
Yeah, everyone cares about full nudity, I think. But yeah, it's interesting. We hear a lot about stakes, and people, the stakes aren't big enough, and everything has to be about the fate of the world. Oftentimes, I think personal stories and intimate stakes are more interesting. Obviously with The Walking Dead, the fate of the world is kind of decided. It's screwed. It's over, and so all we're left to care about is what remains, the individual characters. And certainly with The Walking Dead, we were really amazed by how many people cared about the fate of a 9-year-old girl. It was pretty amazing.
Right. Do you feel like you need to be in a certain place to care about, how do you get someone who doesn't have kids care about protecting a child, for example?
I would like to think that you don't necessarily have to have kids in order to care about them. Although it was weird, my daughter was born midway through season 1 of The Walking Dead, and suddenly it was like a switch was flipped, and I suddenly cared more. I get it now. I care more about Clementine now. It's very weird. When I first saw Taken, That was before my daughter was born, and there's that great scene where Liam Neeson is having dinner with this family, and he just shoots this woman out of nowhere because he wants to find out where his daughter's been taken. And I remember thinking at the time, holy crap, Liam, went a little bit over the top there. And then I saw it again subsequently after my daughter was born, and when I saw that scene again, I was like, I totally get it now. That's completely reasonable, because I understand. So certainly if you're playing to an audience of parents and people who get it emotionally, that helps. But I don't think you can rely on that. I mean, especially with video games, there's there's a big portion of the younger audience out there. But I think all you need is like a basic humanity, a basic empathy to care about other characters. A lot of the death threats I got when I was writing episode 4, and people would say, "You better not hurt that little girl," weren't all from parents. And so I kind of felt like we had, to some extent, done our job in appealing to people's just general empathy and humanity and caring about others.
Sure. We've added our fourth speaker, Jenova Chen, who will introduce himself. We're, I guess, Jenova Chen of That Game Company, and we're talking about what makes.
By the way, just so you know, this is the guy that made Journey.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. And Flower and Flow, recent acquisition of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. We're talking about what makes a good story going down the row. For you guys at Skybound, like for you personally, what makes a good story, and how is that different maybe for comics than it is for other mediums?
I mean, it's always been about character. Character's the best place to start. But I mean, for me personally, it's about taking characters and the reader out of their comfort zones and exposing them to new experiences. I mean, that's where The Walking Dead lives and breathes, is taking a character and putting them into an unfamiliar situation. But I think that's where you find the most interesting aspects and the hidden characteristics of a character to begin with. So,
for you, where is your comfort zone? What is taking you out of your comfort zone?
Not much. Marriage.
So more marriage and storytelling, more lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
Jenova, for you, what makes a good story in a game? And this is a good question for you because I think you told story in perhaps what would be considered an unorthodox way. But for you, what makes a good story?
Yeah, I mean, if you have played Journey, you will realize there's no dialogue. And how could a story be a story without dialogue, right? I think, I kind of came from a cinema background, which we learned screenwriting, cinema in a school. To me, that story doesn't have to have characters. It doesn't have to have dialogues. It can be a narrative. Well, I guess characters, I mean, like, it doesn't have to be human. I think it's a good story managed to put you on an emotional roller coaster where there's highs and lows. And so at the end of a good story, it needs to deliver a climax that is satisfying, that is surprising to you. So you totally didn't expect it. You're shocked by this narrative. And I think that would be a good story, no matter what the story is or no matter what the feeling at the end is, as long as it's strong and surprising.
So do you feel like Tetris has a story? Do you think that qualifies?
Tetris has a fairly simple story. The first time when I played Tetris, I didn't see the game is going to get really hard. And so that first time when I played, I find it fun, and it's a good narrative for me. But then, as you repeat playing the game, you feel like you can predict all the surprises, and then it loses the value of being a good story anymore.
So for you guys as storytellers, how much of that lies in what you want to say to your audience or to your players, or what they bring to the table in terms of what they'd like to get out of it? Dan, you can start.
Well, I think the interactive medium at this point offers us an opportunity to let players tell us what they want to see and what they want to experience. So, we're in a medium now where we're just creating a world and creating situations and story events and characters, but the players are deciding how the experience unfolds. So really for us, it's about building out support and room for the player to be able to maneuver through and make different choices and experience different things.
And you guys are doing some very interesting stuff. Maybe most people don't know that. You guys are doing stuff behind the scenes as well to watch what players are doing, right?
Well, we're certainly we certainly, if you played Walking Dead, you know we keep the stats at the end of the game for how people responded to certain situations and what they did. So you know we have a pretty good sense for how people feel about different characters. But you know a lot of it is kind of this organic storytelling that happens while we also build our games episodically. So we're delivering 2 hours of content and then building the next 2 hours of content. And during that break period, we're responding to our interpretation of what the players are responding to. But I do think from a storytelling standpoint, games really give us the opportunity to include the viewer into the experience, and I think that's the jumping off point for the next generation of content.
Gary, for you, I mean, I guess it's a non-interactive medium, I guess, that you're often working in. How does that relationship work?
I think even in film, or television, even in a non-interactive medium, I think you always want to leave enough on the table for the audience to feel like they can bring something to themselves. The example I always give is the movie Dead Man Walking, which is a movie about the death penalty. But it doesn't tell you what to think about the death penalty. It presents arguments for and against, and then it kind of leaves you to go away and decide what you think, and you get to contribute your own thoughts and feelings about how to interpret the movie. I think all good art lets the audience bring something of themselves to it. And the great thing about interactive is you can make that much more real. This is going to kind of sound a little bit artsy, but I really do believe that when we sit around in the writer's room on the Walking Dead game, there's a lot of people sitting there and they all have a voice, but I always kind of imagine that there's an empty chair that is eventually going to be occupied by the player. Because we have, even when we're done and we consider the product finished and we hand it over to the player, I feel that we're actually kind of handing the story to you in kind of an unfinished form and saying to the player, well, you now become the last creative collaborator in the storytelling process. You become the final author who gets to decide if the story is going to go this way or that way, if this character should live or die. And it's amazing how far a little goes. I mean, the reality is in The Walking Dead, we call it a tailored experience, but you can't really go off and write your entire radically different story than the one we're telling you. You're always going to get brought back to a central spine, but even the small choices that you make have such a huge impact on the players. What we've learned from the first season is that players really feel like, and that's the real magic of it, is that even by making small choices, you feel like you're now experiencing a story that is yours and no one else's. You've experienced your own uniquely tailored version of the story that you feel so much more invested in because you had a hand in the telling of it. That's something that interactive is so far ahead of traditional medium in telling stories and making players feel that they have some creative equity in the story that's being told.
So is there a wrong way to play a game like The Walking Dead?
Well, that's actually one of the things that was drilled into me a lot by Sean Vanneman and Jake Rodkin, who are the real kind of the brain trust behind The Walking Dead. We always felt very strongly that the choices had to be structured in such a way that the game would never really punish or reward you for the choices that you made. We never really want a player to feel like I made the wrong choice. The difficulty when we create those choice moments is always making them feel like there's no right answer. Each choice that you make is just a different flavor of horrible. Is this person going to die or is that person going to die? And when we get our numbers back, it's very interesting to look at how the choices, people choose this or that. But what's more interesting, I always feel, is the story behind the numbers. I watched a lot of those. You can go on YouTube and watch people, what they call let's play videos, where they go all the way through. And it's an incredible playtesting resource. You see them like pause the game and agonize over the choices that are about to be made. And we learn a lot about not just the choices that people make, but the thought process they go through and how they arrive at those choices. And we often get very surprising results that we can then take that knowledge and apply it to the next episode or the next season of the game that we make. But we're often surprised by how people react to the choices that we present them.
Sean, for you, what does that interplay look like for comics, if at all?
No, I mean, my background, I came from DC Comics, which is more about brand management, and people have a lot more investment in the characters. So they feel like they should, right or wrong, dictate what happens to them. But I think with what Skybound does and Walking Dead and books like Invincible, they come because of the voice. So while we have a community and people, submit letters, and we hear from all sorts of delightful psychopaths and lunatics, ultimately it doesn't affect, the direction of the story, I don't believe. So if your vision is strong enough, I feel like comics, you go along for that ride willingly.
Jenova, in a game like Journey where there isn't a narrator telling you where you're supposed to go, what kind of story
did you expect players to pull out of that experience, and what kind of story did you find they actually did?
I actually find myself stepping on this new ground, which I totally didn't expect myself to be on, which is a lot of the great story the players shared about Journey is not planned by us. It's between the players. I mean, we kind of, like The Walking Dead, it's like it's providing these environments so that the player can project themselves into the world. And in Journey particularly, because there's the other player, so it's like you're projecting your understanding of another real human being. And there's a lot of drama happening between the player that is completely not planned by me. And I find it's very exciting because, just imagine in the future there's like more players involved and they are actually acting, they are real characters from the real world. And when I think about building Journey, it's more like I'm building a narrative arc of a various social scenarios, but the rest of it is left for the player to improvise. And it's kind of difficult if you're a designer, you wanted to control the narrative, but I kind of like it because it's exciting and it's hard to control. It's this very new place.
Right, but that must be incredibly frustrating for you at some level. Like you probably don't want people to harass other players in the game.
So what would happen is once we put a bunch of people together, we test out the scenarios. A lot of time it doesn't work. Like people will try to like grief each other. They will try to like lead other player to some random places which they get stuck. And what I find most of the time what we're trying to do is to find those things early and trying to stop them by changing the design, using different interactive feedback to incentivize the good behavior and to prevent bad behavior. It's quite interesting. It's like at that point I'm not writing a story, but I'm defining the rules to change the moral values of our characters. I find it's really exciting, just fun.
Sure. One of the questions I had, I guess this applies to 3 out of the 4 of you. So in the world of The Walking Dead, there is sort of this arch narrative that you're living to survive. Every day means something, and it's about these very human relationships that develop. I'm curious, do you think The Walking Dead works best as a television show, as a comic book, or as a video game?
Well, I think The Walking Dead obviously works well in all 3. And I think, well, I think we can do things that the others can't, but I think that the comic book brought it to life. The show exposed it in a very accessible way to a lot of people. And then the game gave people a way to interact with it in the game space that was unique to it. So, I think the source material, the beauty is the source material carries across multiple media. And I think that's something that people need to look at who are building franchises now. That's the opportunity. Each media can do its own part in building out a franchise and bringing value and introducing people to it in a different way on their own terms. I personally would say I think playing The Walking Dead allows you to connect with the world in a way that's special and unique, in that the other medias can't do. But Walking Dead also has really exceeded expectation as far as how huge it can be in every medium that it's in. So there's something relevant at the core of the story that works across all medium.
Yeah, I think they all have their own strengths, but there is something unique. And this is not unique to The Walking Dead, but there is something unique about the interactive version of it. The Walking Dead comes out every Sunday night, and Monday morning there's everyone likes to have their water cooler conversation, either online or in person. They talk about what they thought about the episode last night. But they're ultimately all talking about they all saw the same story. What I love about the Walking Dead game is when you go online or talk to people and they're comparing notes about the most recent episode that they just played, there's a slow realization that even though they all played the same game, they didn't actually experience the same story because their version was unique to them. Oh, that character's alive in your version? That's really cool, and only games can do it. Only interactive can do it, and I think for that reason, I'll go and say I think the game version's the best version. Then no one else here will say it, but I will. I think
I agree.
And the comic, the comic and the TV show are both fantastic. We're just a little bit better.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I would say playing Walking Dead makes me feel like I lived in that world, that universe for a couple hours. And that's very different from mounting a camera on some guy who's living in that universe, you know? Yeah.
And just to cut, I do want to say something else about Journey. The thing that I think that's the most amazing to me about Journey, I mean, I'm a guy who's concerned with story. Some people don't like story in their games. I feel like everything I do in a video game, I have to have a narrative context. I have to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And the amazing thing about Journey, for someone who likes story, and I thought it was one of the best storytelling experiences in video games ever. And what's amazing about that is it uses almost nothing. It's such a minimalist palette that it uses to tell a story. It gives you almost nothing. It asks you to fill in 90% of the story with your own imagination. And it's interesting, as someone who comes from, I work in Hollywood, where most of the notes I get from studios are, this isn't explained enough. The audience needs to understand exactly what's going on. They're terrified of ambiguity. If they saw Journey, I guess they would crap their pants because they're like, oh, we don't even understand what's going on here. But that's what's beautiful about it. And again, only games can do that. Because I think when you're being told a story as a movie or a television show, there's an understanding that you can kind of sit back, fold your arms, and be passively engaged and say, okay, tell me a story. You have to do all the heavy lifting. But with a video game, you kind of take the player by the hand and say, well, look, we're going to tell this story together because you're actively engaged. You pick up the controller, and you and I are going to go on a journey of discovery together. We're going to figure this story out together. And so that's why I think Journey probably wouldn't work in its current form as well as like a movie or a play or whatever, because I think the player has to come to it, the audience has to come to it understanding that I'm going to do some of the work here with you. So when Journey tells you a very minimalist story and asks you to kind of fill in the blanks, because you're already engaged, you are that character, you're more, your imagination is more willing to do some of that work.
So Jenova, there's no Broadway adaptation of Journey in the works.
Actually, there are a group of people working on animation adaptation of Journey as their hobby right now.
How do you feel about that personally?
I saw a couple of fans made animation. They are actually really moving. I was surprised. But I was just going to comment on what Gary just said, because what I got from what he said is that video game is natively more engaging. So the tolerance for boredom from a player audience compared to a TV audience is a lot higher. You can have a much more boring story in a game and people still kind of go through it. But if it was a movie, if you make most of the story in a modern game into a movie, that would be terribly boring. I just think we have it easier because people have something to do while they're experiencing the story. Yeah.
So are there certain stories that can't be told in games that maybe can't be told in comic books or maybe can't be told in television? For your respective mediums, are there certain things that you guys can't do? Dan, is there anything that Telltale cannot touch?
Well, it would take different levels of commitment and investment in order to make stuff happen. But I always believe that everything's possible. So I think so long as you can create an interesting world for people to submerge themselves into, then you can create an experience that allows the player to explore and enjoy it. There's no story that I look at that I'm super afraid of doing, but it wouldn't necessarily make sense to do like Downton Abbey, which people joke about all the time. Like, when are we doing the Downton Abbey game? But actually, that could work pretty well because of all the all the interpersonal drama.
First-person shooter.
Yeah.
Downton Abbey.
Those are the types of things where it's like, okay, we would be jumping too far out in front of the curve, because how could you introduce people that aren't gamers who might like that franchise to come in and play and interact? It would just be foreign. So we wouldn't jump that far. But ultimately, I do think something like that will be interactive and it will be possible to do it because there's so much different maneuvering that the player can do in the world and different different consequences of their choices. So I don't know. I don't know if I'd tell like an avant-garde story or something like that. But
is there like an emotion that you guys have difficulty conveying? It's like it's tough to get players to feel X when you're making a game.
I think that players feel, well, at least from the Walking Dead experience, players feel deeply when they're in the game, and probably more deeply than other mediums because they've invested in the world. They've put their self and their choices into the situation, and everything that comes back to them is a result of what they decided. So if you're watching passive entertainment and something happens on screen, you're just kind of following this character through the world. But if something happens in a game to a character that you've been with, you've built up a relationship with them over time based on choices that you've made and things that you've decided to do because you're trying to keep them alive and nurture a relationship. So I think it creates deeper connections. I just think we need to there's so much, it's such fertile ground for us to nurture as an industry. And that's why I think anything's possible going forward.
Sure. Gary, do you feel like there are certain things, I mean, you've worked across a wide variety of mediums, do you feel like there are certain things that maybe you can do in comics?
I think at this point it's a tough question to answer because it's still very early. I think the evolution, the emergence of video gaming interactive as a way to tell stories is still very, very nascent. I think we're still kind of in the black and white silent movie era of figuring out how to tell stories. Everybody remembers that, well, maybe not some of the younger members of the audience, but a lot of us remember when CD-ROM was first a thing, and all we did for a while was we had this concept of an interactive movie, and we just aped what had come before without really understanding that interactive gave us other tools and other things that we could do to make the story more interesting. And we're learning more now, but it's still really, really early. And I don't think it's, you look at video games that are out there, even the ones that tell pretty good stories, they are mostly genre pieces. Most video games that are out there now fall into very, very easily identifiable popcorn-type genres. They're either action stories or thrillers or horror. They're very, very basic, and this is why the idea like the Downton Abbey example comes up a lot, is because people are starting to ask the question now, well, can we do more? Can drama and character-based storytelling be an interactive thing? Can we actually tell those stories without relying on guns and explosions and constant action? And we're just trying to figure that out now, and Walking Dead, I think, does go a little bit further than a lot of storytelling in games and has succeeded in making players feel a wider range of emotion than just simple scares and adrenaline. But it still relies a lot on zombies and action around it to kind of encapsulate the drama and make us feel like we're seeing an exciting story. Whether or not, Downton Abbey or The King's Speech could be a video game, we joke about it. I think we are on our way there. But like I said, we're still very much in the infancy of figuring out how to do this and make it interesting for the audience.
Just one more question for you guys, and then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience. I'm sure you all have questions for these four. I was wondering if there's along those lines, is there a story that you guys have been dying to tell someday in the future, let's say 10, 15 years from now, in interactive form? What would it be? You start, Jenova. You start back to front.
I'm actually really interested in the future, which currently the technology not allowing us, but very soon is possible. The future where I can talk to a character in a game just like I talk to you. And the character can pick up all the nuances that my language has expressed. If I can talk to a video game character and the video game character understands me and it has a kind of internal logic, I have a feeling that I could be more emotionally attached to the character. It's kind of like funny because I say this a lot. This is my video game grad school professor, Chris Swen. He used to say that movie never really become big until they have sound. The silent movie was like all these like gesturing, play, but it never gets big because language is such an important part.
But Journey the musical, so that's what we're looking at.
Right, and Journey, honestly, Journey, as a player, what is my input? My input is the stick up, down, left, right. That's my input. Just look at the beauty of language, how much nuance that can go compared to up, down, left, right. When you can, so my professor was saying like, video game is only like, 30, 40 years. We didn't even have sound yet. Imagine if the player can just talk to the game and how it's going to open up to make games so much more exciting for everybody. And I'm looking forward to that day.
Sean, is there one for you? A story you'd love to see told someday?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're just missing the immersive quality of it. Actually feeling you interact. There's always a distance. Things don't look real or things don't feel real. So, you know, that's what I feel like I'm missing.
Gary?
I mean, just because Sean's thought about comics, I think that, you know, the digital revolution in comics is also going to open it up in such a way. I mean, a printed paper page is always going to be static by its very nature, but as comics are migrating over to the iPad and tablets, and they can do more, and it's not just animation and bells and whistles and things like that, but I think there is going to be, I mean, I used to love the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, and in some way the Telltale games are an evolution of that. I think we might see comics getting in on some of that action as well.
You know, I agree with Jenova in that, you know, the technology needs to come online to kind of get past interface and make interaction more natural with games, and I think that'll make the role-playing a little bit, will make the role-playing more real. And so when you're inside of a world and you're talking to a character, it's all very natural, and you're not limited by all the choices that are required to support the design. So I think that's a big deal. The other thing that I'm really interested in is procedurally generated story or emergent story that comes from player choice and kind of creates characters with enough AI to create a story experience that is truly unique, because the characters in the world are responding to the player actions in believable ways based on the system that runs them. And I think those types of simulations are going to be super interesting too, because then it's just populate a world with the types of characters that you think people would be interested in, and then let them go. It'd almost be like, you know, an MMO, except every character is kind of handwritten and hand tailored to be the most interesting man in the world type of thing. You know, instead of someone that's just, you know, typing away and going crazy. So in my mind, that's super interesting, and I think that is hopefully in the next 10 or so years will be a reality.
Yeah, I know for me personally, we have Warren Spector sitting in the front row. He's talked about that one city block idea for games, so I know that would be a really exciting thing to do. And he put his hat on, so. Let's open it up for questions.
Cool. I've got two questions for you. One is, how much of the story in The Walking Dead did y'all have to cut out, as far as like decisions like the players made during the story that you really would have wanted to actually see in the game itself? And the other one is, I don't remember the name of the game or the show, but they interact with each other, in which people who are playing the game, in an MMO fashion, ends up affecting the actual canon in the show itself. Again, I can't remember the name.
Defiance.
Yeah.
Defiance, yeah.
Yeah. What are y'all's opinion on that kind of interactive storytelling?
Well, I think Defiance is definitely very bold, and it's going to be real interesting to watch and see how that goes. But I definitely think that idea that you know, let the player make an impact on the world and then respond with some piece of linear content that responds is a great idea. So, you know, it's nice to see them out there doing it, and we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure people will evolve from it. As far as the Walking Dead story stuff, I can't really think of anything.
I can't think of any specific examples, but I know that there are often conversations we had about specific scenes that may have been a great story for a television show, but with a video game, there's a different criteria, and if there's nothing for the player to do, or we can't present it, there's no great choice moment, there's no way for the player to steer the action, then it just didn't meet the bar in the same way. My first draft for the episode that I wrote, we had to rewrite it a lot, because I kind of fell into the trap of just writing a more linear TV type episode, and we went back and changed a lot of things that made it, you know, basically gave the player more to do. Again, there's an expectation on the player's side that they're going to be constantly engaged, and if you just have them watching a scripted moment for too long, they'll start to tune out. So we constantly have to worry about why is this interesting, not just for the characters, but for the player, who's really, you know, an active agent in the scene as well.
A question.
Are there any games out there that provide examples of what you all want to see in storytelling besides Walking Dead or Journey?
There's this game called Facade. Do you know about it? I always find it fascinating, but unfortunately I didn't see anything like that afterwards.
Yeah, we looked at Facade a lot. I think Heavy Rain is something that Telltale has always looked at. In whatever David Cage is doing, he seems to be pushing on the same buttons that we are, really trying to create interactive storytelling.
I know it's not a really popular view these days, but I personally think that BioWare does great work in storytelling. The stuff that they've done, particularly with the Mass Effect games, I think has shown a lot of us what is possible. And Telltale has a slightly different approach, but it shows that you can really they do amazing jobs with branching narratives, I think, and the work that Ken Levine does. I mean, I'm really excited to see BioShock Infinite, because I think he's the first-person world where the story is baked right into the action. We have the luxury of just telling you a story in a fairly traditional way, but finding ways to kind of weave the storytelling right into the first-person perspective and keeping you in that. Keeping you in the action, but also kind of feeding you story in a way that you absorb it and understand it properly, is really hard to do. And I think Ken is understands storytelling as well as he understands gameplay mechanics. So I think Infinite's going to be one to watch this year as well.
Next question.
I wanted to ask about the writing process for the Walking Dead game. Like, so if you sit down with a blank piece of paper, how do you start the process of actually coming up with a story? I mean, I don't mean like, where does the idea come from, but I mean, do you structure it in terms of like a narrative arc, and you have scenes? Like, how do you write it?
Well, the season arc is fleshed out first, and kind of what are the critical choices along the season arc are all laid out, and the characters are all identified, the scenes and environments are identified, and then we start filling in the detail when we actually write the script. And then, Gary was responsible for pulling together a full script for episode 4, so you might want to take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, when I came on, Lee and Clementine were already there. The basic kind of beginning and middle and end was already there. I contributed some specific ideas, but I kind of don't want to do spoilers for people that aren't here, but there's a really, really horrible thing that happens in episode 4 that was always there from the very beginning. I think you have to have the confidence that you understand the story that you're telling, and to not, kind of second guess yourself along the way. Because you've got to remember, we were still building the back end of the season when episodes 1 and 2 were already out. So you don't want. I think to some extent you have to have faith in the decisions that you've made, and not let audience reaction, throw you off your game too much. But I mean, in answer to your question, a writer once said that what you do is where you start. You take a blank piece of paper and you stare it until your eyes start to bleed, which I think is that pretty much sums up kind of the agony of trying to create something from nothing. And that's as true in interactive as it is anywhere else.
Next question.
Question on, I'm just wondering, because the Walking Dead source material from the comic book, very strong fans there, a very strong artistic vision, and then the television show, and you have fans of each, and they often disagree. What kind of pressure did this present when you came up with the idea of creating the game, knowing that you were going to have to start creating episodes before you got to see that fan reaction? Was there a lot of pressure thinking that, if we blow it the first 2 episodes, we're going to lose our whole investment because the fans of the comic book won't like it, or the fans of the television show won't like it?
Well, I think we commit to the fan. When we start building the product, we commit to the fan. So we do things, we make decisions that are about what does the fan want to see, in hopes that if this was just another piece of content around the franchise, would the situations be interesting for the fan? So we're always counting on the fan and delivering something for them, because there's a real blueprint for that. Like what Robert did and succeeded with in the comic book is pretty clear, and what was working on the show is pretty clear. So that's what we base it on. So the fan is kind of our building block. It's, will it reach out? Will people who aren't super fans be interested in it? And will it give it the momentum that it needs to get to the size that we want? That's always the risk. Is it going to transcend it almost? But in general, we start with the fan and being part of the franchise and rewarding the fans of the franchise. So hopefully it works. If it doesn't work for them, we're just sunk. We just did the wrong thing. We messed up royally. So.
Next question.
Hi, so I was wondering, why do you think, the visual novel genre of games, why do you think that's not so popular in the US compared to maybe Asian countries? Like, I know Phoenix Wright is really the only big game that hit it up here.
I think and Phoenix Wright is a great game that we've looked at for a long time. I don't know. I think that there's an expectation of what a game is. I think historically there's been a business model that has narrowed the types of games that have a chance at success. I think the definition of success is when you're talking about the retail business model, the definition of success is so huge that something that might only be might only get 1 million sales isn't something that people pursue or isn't viewed as a success. So, now that digital distribution has taken over and you can get something out to people, hopefully we'll see more games like that go out and succeed, because it is possible to let people know that you're building a game like that and to let people that are interested in that kind of thing experience it. But I think historically the business model has prevented new genres from entering kind of across the board, all types of games.
There's a good question here. Jenova, you didn't grow up as a native English speaker, and you've talked in the past about wanting to create experiences that cross cultures. How did that play into your development process when you were making Journey?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up playing a lot of interactive novel from Japan and really liking the complexity and the deep thinking went into those narratives. But I think when I play those interactive novel from Asia, I don't think I'm playing a game. I think I'm reading a very well-written novel that has multiple options, multiple narratives. It's kind of like the early interactive movies in America. And somehow people didn't like it here. And I don't know why, but I think the video game scene in America is a lot more geared towards the younger generation, and maybe that's why they crave for more actions rather than more readings.
They're a bunch of animals.
Let's take one more question. I think Cliff Blazinski has a question.
Hey guys.
Cliff Blazinski, creator of Gears of War.
Hi Gary. Okay, so first off, congratulations on cracking the whole episodic thing, because everybody had been trying and failing up to that point, and you guys did it, and the whole transmedia thing as well. My question is more of a fun one. If any of you could find a classic Hollywood movie that you could adapt to interactive, which one would it be and why?
Wow, that's a good question. Someone has to go first. I need to think about it for a second.
A classic movie to make interactive. I have to think, and I don't know, classic is an interesting definition. I think Godfather's already been has already been a game, but I would love to do Godfather or Scarface, something like that, where it's so character driven and the stakes are so high around the decisions that you make and how you pursue things. I just think it would fall really well into what we do well.
I thought of it. I wouldn't do it as a direct adaptation of the movie, but I would love to do the continuing adventures of The Big Lebowski. I want to be the dude, and I want to go away and like solve more bizarre cases and just live in that world and interact with those wacky characters.
More ferrets.
Yeah.
Jenova, Sean?
I don't think I'm going to do any adaptation if there's involvement of dialogues. I'm not a good writer. I'm not qualified to write a...
Chaplin, maybe?
You do the artist.
The artist? Well, maybe. I mean, I really love the Koyaanisqatsi, the film. Are you guys familiar with that? Koyaanisqatsi?
Yeah.
I would do that. Yeah.
Sean, close that.
I was actually going to say Scarface too. It's just a shame that so many licensed products that have come out over the past 30 years have been pretty shitty. which is I think where The Walking Dead gets major bonus points for actually delivering on the license as well as its own unique gaming experience, which is incredibly difficult to do.
I would say 2001. On that note, thank you all so much. I believe some of the guys will be over there signing things, but thank you so much, and have a great rest of the week. Take care.